Great light, everyone, in love of living Father.
Erich Klima was more of a base where a Schwabian dialect the families of the soldiers were also living. So it was a military situation. And when I got there, the section I was in was all German. They spoke a Schwabian dialect of German. And I don't know why that dialect was chosen, but that's what everyone on Mars spoke. And the group of kids I came with, we were assigned a barracks room, and we that was where we lived. Yeah, bunk beds, three layers up. There were 12 of us in the room. And we were there without a parent. No parental authority at all. It was just the 12 of us in the room. And we were responsible for our own uniforms and our own maintenance and hygiene. And we went to Shula with the colony kids. It was the school that the Germans had created for their own children. And because we were going to be serving with them, they didn't want us to be stupid. So that's one of the things that the Germans do that the other factions don't. The other factions will just train you for your job, just what you need to know for your job. And so you're basically, in the other factions, you're basically a street child with skills.
Okay.
Where the Germans, they educate you with your own kids. You are expected to maintain a certain standard of behavior. I arrived, I was 9 years old, and they kept me in Shula for 10 years. They were creating a educated class of people to serve in their Mars militia. So this was something I've not seen in any other faction. So I don't know much about the Russian faction, but I know that the Russian kids that were in the German faction were put through Shula as well. This was not just me. This was not just our group. This was their standard operating procedure. They did not want stupid people.
Do you mean that there were Russian kids given over to the German colonies?
There had to have been. There were Russians serving with the Germans in space.
Okay. Which were what? Do you think they were cooperating? Do you think they were like handed over by a treaty like the U.S. personnel had been, or how was it? As far as you know.
I don't know the details,
but
I know that there were Russians serving with the Germans in space.
Okay.
So, I believe there were 2 Russian kids in my shula.
All right.
So, we had uniforms, the jump, I guess Europeans call it a jumper. Americans call it a sweater.
Right.
Or a cardigan. Was chocolate brown, and the boys wore pants, not lederhosen, but long trousers, and the girls wore gentle skirts, and those were also the same chocolate brown. The girls had a bow tie, and the boys had a bow tie.
Okay, got it.
So there were gender differences, and both genders wore these ugly, ugly, ugly brown shoes. My friend in Austria that we discussed said that those are some of the most expensive and sought out shoes in her country. So I guess they thought they were doing a good job. But we had white shirts, both genders, and there was a short sleeve and a long sleeve version. And it was up to us which we wore. Okay. Everything had to be like military. And they gave us a little bit of time to learn. But the other kids would make fun of us if we did it wrong. It was a very Germanic culture,
Mm.
as in we had to respect the authority, the teacher, the military, the authorities of the base, instant obedience.
Mhm.
But amongst ourselves, we were encouraged to bully, just not get caught at it.
Okay.
There were penalties if you got caught. So you couldn't just beat up another child in class, but you could do things to manipulate the situation. They were trying to teach us to be assertive and to fight to defend ourselves.
Okay.
A very different mindset than what there is in America today.
Okay.
So,
The teachers, were they male, female? Was there any contact, like personal contact between you and the teachers, and how did that go?
it was set up on the Prussian system where there was a medical teacher who was very strict,
Mhm.
and we were each at a small desk,
Mhm.
and we had a slate tablet. At least when we started off, it was a slate tablet and chalk. And we did a lot of writing and erasing and writing some more.
Mhm.
It was, we repeated after the teacher out loud.
Mhm.
And if you said it wrong too many times, he would come slap your hand with the ruler. Or otherwise humiliate you in front of the class.
How many people were in your class? Approximately.
30?
Okay. Most of them were German kids, and some of them from the American group, right?
Over half were German, and the rest of them were Americans and a couple of other ethnic groups. Jeez. So almost half of us were expected to become part of the Mars Defense Force.
Mhm.
We were basically already enlisted in their military,
Okay.
and considered this very basic training. You got to remember that my group came from Langley, and we had not, I knew how to read and write English because my mom had taught me before I got there. But the rest of the kids didn't. They didn't know how to read and write in any language. They were illiterate.
Mhm.
And this was a real problem for the Germans. So we were taught a lot of subjects differently than they're taught on Earth. Starting with math, they used a base 60 math system. And a lot of the numbers that are irrational in base 10 are not irrational in base 60. They come out to perfect numbers, which trying to explain that is like teaching an American to speak Russian. You have to really work at it.
All right. What other subjects were there? What was it, like a general curriculum like that you have in school? Physics?
It was general curriculum that you would have in any school where you wanted the kids to be able to think.
Okay.
I'll be honest, American schools don't teach kids to think anymore. They teach them to do a job.
Yeah.
So this was a school that wanted to produce people who could think.
Was there a heavy emphasis on things like astronomy, astrophysics, space-related subjects that you would need? Was there like local biology, like Martian biology, geography, something like that in the curriculum?
Yeah. What they started with, though, was German language and literature. Sure. And their own history.
So you can, kind of come into the culture. Yeah.
So you could come into the culture, and once we understood how to speak
Mhm.
German.
Okay.
Then, and where the culture was coming from, then they started us with basic math,
Mm-hmm.
basic astrophysics,
Okay.
which was taught very differently there.
Sure.
They, they said that Einstein was wrong.
That
That
Einstein was wrong. Okay.
Einstein was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
His relativity was wrong. That first off, the speed of light is not a constant. That it looks like it until you get into close to light speed, and then you find out it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Time travel is very possible.
Mm-hmm.
So the speed of light is not something that's going to stop you going forward. It's not a limit. You can continue to go as fast as you want.
Mm-hmm.
They taught electric universe mixed with quantum mechanics.
Can you give an example, like what kind, like something that would represent that?
Okay. In basic terms, gravity doesn't exist
Mm-hmm.
as a force. It's a side effect of magnetism.
Mm-hmm. Electromagnetism then. Mm-hmm.
No, not the electro part. It's a side effect of magnetism.
Okay.
So you have every astral body is like a magnet. It has a positive and a negative pole.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these astral bodies, it's more than one place. So
Mm-hmm.
they're not like unipolar, they're all over the place. And that each astral body in a system is tied to the star
Mm-hmm.
by portals.
Okay. You mean the planets, the bodies, right? The celestial bodies in a star system. Okay.
They're all tied to the star with portals.
With portals. All right.
And these portals, the endpoints change as the astral body rotates.
Uh-huh.
It sounds insane to people who haven't been taught it. So this is part of the basics of the system that
I know it.
the Germans use for space travel, because you can piggyback on those portals.
Uh-huh. It's like a gravitational assist, but it's a little different. So you use a port. You basically That's what has been told already, that they are waiting for a special alignment to happen when they can exit through this portal. Is that happening? Like if you are on Earth, do you go from Earth to the star, to the sun, and then out?
You can, yes.
So this is like this is literally a stargate. So you go from Earth to
literally
the sun.
A stargate.
Okay.
And there are stargates in the sun that will take you to other star systems.
Sure.
Star systems form in clusters of 5, 6, up to 20 different stars that kind of rotate.
Yeah.
Clusters that are similar to a mini galaxy for people who are willing to think about it. And they travel together. And the change in position is very slow relative to the lifespans of humans. So it's, we live very short lives relative to motions in space. Some of the other races, like the Draco, live half a million years. So they've had more time to watch this stuff.
So
the Germans have a lot from the Draco.
I see.
And so they learned a lot of actual, truthful way things operate from the Draco. There's been a lot of sharing.
Did you guys have the Draco or any other ETs present at the school teaching you anything at any time?
Not in the early stages.
All right, but later on.
Later on, what would be the equivalent of 10th and 11th, 12th grades?
I see.
That the last 3-4 years.
Of like the high school.
In Shula, that last 3 or 4 years, you're taught your specialization, and it's it's based on your genetic capabilities.
Okay.
It's not based on something as arbitrary as what you want to do. It's based on they've tested you genetically. They've regressed you and found out what you were at soul level, what you have been in past lives. They know what you're capable of.
Oh my God. Okay.
And they train you for the best use of your capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the last 3 years. It's not at the beginning.
So,
at the beginning, you have all human teachers, and they are all Germans.
Uh-huh.
And you are speaking German, and you are living in a German community, and you go to school for 4 hours a day, and you work in the colony gardens for another 3 hours a day. You don't have homework.
Uh-huh.
You do everything in class.
I see.
You might, after we were starting our specialization, we would have glass pads.
Uh-huh.
And we would have books to read there.
I see.
But when I was in Shula, the MarsNet was still very limited, because it was one of the people that I went with was the person who uploaded most of the MarsNet. So
they were still building it up. So that was in the beginning of the 60s. So I presume by the 70s it was pretty much, by the middle and 70s it was more or less developed. I see.
Well,
okay.
It was at the beginning. It was just basically photocopying documents and translating them, because he could speak English, German, and Russian, and he was very good at all three.
Uh-huh.
So that was his major skill, was languages, like yours.
Uh-huh.
So
okay,
if you had been on Mars, then you would have been uploading the MarsNet.
Sure. Right. So you get off school every day, you go to work in the colony. What do people do in the colony? The gardens, what else?
We had garden duty because they thought we were capable of that. Everybody had something that they did that contributed to the welfare of the colony.
Uh-huh.
Some of them it was guard duty, because the Germans had started a war with 2 of the sentient races that already lived there. Because I've mentioned before, every square inch of the solar system belongs to somebody else.
Uh-huh.
And the Germans had made treaties with the Draco to sublease. Well, the places that the Draco owned were really not that suitable for humans on Mars. So they picked out where they wanted to live. And I'm not sure exactly what it was that they used to bomb them with, but it was something that would kill everything that was there without destroying the physical. And 6 months later, the Germans could move in.
I see. Okay.
And so the Raptors had survived whatever it was that took the atmosphere on Mars.
Uh-huh.
And we're just coming back into the stage of building cities.
Uh-huh.
When the Germans bombed them back into the Stone Age. Your level of technology is dependent on your ability to produce it. And so when their cities were destroyed, their technology was destroyed. So this war put them back into the Stone Age. Now,
So they came at you, at everything.
oh,
Yeah.
they came at us with everything they had and then some. And they were vicious because this was a fight to the death.
Uh-huh.
And the Mars Mantids, which are a different race than the Mantid Empire, they were still capable of spaceflight.
Uh-huh.
So they managed to escape the worst of the bombing.
Uh-huh.
And so they were also fighting us.
On ships, you say?
With ships.
Okay.
So you had two formidable races pissed as hell that we had bombed their cities and had moved into them. And the sheer chutzpah of the Germans to do this was just like beyond belief. You know, and I'm sitting there watching this and going, how did they get by with this?
Exactly. Did the Draco support them with this? Or did they?
No, the Draco were actually pretty pissed about it because they told us, because I remember when we were going to leave Ares Klima because we were moving.
Uh-huh.
And we were told, you can't leave. You have to find somebody else to finish out your lease if you leave.
Uh-huh. So that was a real rent.
Yeah, it was a matter of rent. We had to stay there and pay our rent or find somebody else who would.
Interesting.
And that was when they let the CIA move into the other half.
Oh my God. So you mean Ares Prime, the place, the location was originally owned by the Draco who sublet it to you.
Uh-huh.
But you basically needed to pay for that, and you couldn't. So they wanted to occupy another territory, but they now couldn't leave because
Well, we left the skeleton crew, and enough that the Americans couldn't own it entirely.
Right.
But yeah, I was stationed out of Ares Klima even after the Germans moved.
Sure. Wow.
My group was still there. Now, you wanted to know about the other subjects.
Yes.
I remember a class, I would have been 12, 13 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It was a class about the other races we would be likely to be exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
They were not all local Mars races,
okay.
But they were races that were known to frequent the solar system. And there were about 20 of them. And we were taught everything about them,
mm-hmm.
and including how to kill them. This was considered to be a self-defense course. There were 3 races that we were told, do not attempt to kill them, just leave them the fuck alone. Do not engage.
Which were?
One of them was Aldebaran.
Uh-huh. The big-headed guys? Or?
Actually, they look just like us.
Okay.
They're just nasty as hell.
Uh-huh.
There was one set of German ships that showed up there. Well, after all, they had been talking to Maria Orsich.
Sure.
And so the Germans thought they had an invitation, and they showed up in orbit and were immediately disintegrated.
Oh,
You do not show up there without an invitation. Even with an invitation, it's not a good idea. They are basically, there's a zone around their star. You don't go there.
so the Aldebarans are human, fully humanoid, human-looking extraterrestrials. Okay, what were other races?
Well, we were told about the Lyrans and told to not engage.
Which ones?
The Lyrans are from the constellation Lyra.
Yeah, I mean, how do they look?
They're taller than us, a couple of feet. So you're talking over 2 meters tall, and they evolved from large cats.
Okay, so the cat species.
The cat species.
Feline, yeah.
Do not engage. No matter what you do, they are difficult at best.
And we're talking about space battles on ships, right? We're not talking like meeting them in the field or something, right?
We're talking meeting them in the field.
We're talking meeting them on the surface.
Yeah, we're talking meeting them on the surface of Mars.
Okay.
We were not to engage with Lyrans. Not ever. We were told about the 7 races of the Draco. And the 6 subject races don't like being called Draco.
Okay. So
but I can't remember what their names are.
They're different.
They're all different. They're all different species. And they don't interbreed. They rarely even talk to each other except through chain of command. The bosses are always alphas. And the alphas have a chain of command. And they all answer to the queen. Or the queen mother. Or both. And we were told if you are dealing with an alpha drac on your own, you do not engage.
That was the Germans who told you that, right?
It was the Germans that said that, yes. Yeah. You do not engage if you are on your own. You do not engage with any of the draconian races if you are on your own, period.
Why would they tell you that? Because you were sort of like in the same space with them. Did they hope that they would ever, be on par with the Draco, or how? Wasn't that obvious? I mean, the Draco were much more superior technologically and everything.
The Draco are much more superior in every way that I've seen. They're taller, they're bigger, they're stronger.
Sure.
Their base intelligence level starts at 300 IQ and goes up from there. A 300 IQ Draco is considered retarded.
Whoa.
So they have psionic abilities that are beyond anything any human has ever had. And engaging with one against orders is basically calling to be killed.
Right.
So it was practical advice. Do not engage. You just don't mess with them.
Okay, since we're talking about this, now you have to answer the $64,000 question, which Randy Kramer did not answer me because we talked about something else. The American MDF was engaging a draconian group there on Mars, and they said that the draconians were both meddling with their conflict with the mantids and with the raptors, and it was like a 4-sided conflict almost. So what he said that is that they all teamed up on the surface against this incoming draconian invasion. Were these Draco the same Draco that were in alliance with the Germans, or were they like a different faction?
Number one, I was not aware of that happening.
Okay,
So it must have been after I left Mars.
sure. Mhm.
Number two, the Draco are an empire. There's always at least 4 or 5 coup attempts going on in any given point. You have a empire run by a queen and her sisters and her daughters. And they occasionally get a bug up their butt that they'd make a better queen.
I see.
And you have factions going on. And it's a political landmine dealing with them. And that's on the best of days.
Sure.
And if the queen has had to deal with having to kill one of her sisters who tried to kill her, she's not going to be in a good mood to deal with you.
Did you guys have as like direct interaction with the royals there? How do you know?
No.
Okay, I see. But you know that from somewhere else.
That was basically Exopolitics 101.
Okay. Which you were taught.
Which I was taught, yes.
Okay.
I was taught that in Shula. I was taught in Shula that the 2 religions allowed in Nachtwaffen, the German space fleets, were Asatru for the enlisted men and Artisana for the officers. That Asatru, that the gods were not gods, they were deified humans. So they were great ancestors rather than gods in human terms.
Okay.
And that the Order of the Black Sun, which in German is Schwarze Sonne, came out of the Teutonic Knights, which I've been trying to verify that in Earth study research. And I think I've made a couple of connections as to how a Roman Catholic martial monk order would come up with the occult beliefs taught in Schwarze Sonne.
Wow.
So,
what did you guys do in terms of like religious practices then at the base in the colony?
In terms of religious practices, we would have like holiday festivals based on the Asatru cycle. They were based on the points of the orbit of Mars rather than the orbit of Earth.
Okay.
But it would basically be equinoxes and solstices, marking winter and summer, and then the 2 times a year that was even. So it's Asatru, as it's practiced on Mars or in Nachtwaffen, is a solar cult.
I see.
And it's adapted to whatever planet you're on. And those who are in ships use an Earth calendar. And most of them believe that Earth has been destroyed in a cobalt bomb war. that it won't be inhabitable for another 10,000 years. So there is no concern over what's happening here at all.
I see.
There are a few higher officers who know better, and we're told that Earth is here when they send us back. But while you're out there, you don't know.
I see.
Unless you're on a ship like Tony that does come to Earth. So the rest of us had no clue.
So the ETs, the ET teachers, who were they?
I had a Jurikan,
Mhm.
that's the Draco warriors, teaching hand-to-hand combat.
And-
Or in our case, avoiding being hit by him.
Okay.
Um,
I was curious because he's probably like
this was
5 times bigger than you, so
no, he was not quite twice my height.
oh, okay.
But yeah, he was just a little bigger than the Mars
I
Raptors,
see.
which would have been our
Main
battle opponents.
opponents. Okay.
So if you can beat something that's a little bigger than your battle appointment, yeah, those were our main opponents in warfare were the Mars Raptors, and he was a little bigger. Because they're turtles,
Mhm.
he wasn't as mobile at the waist as the Raptors were,
Mhm.
but he made a good stand-in.
Okay.
And we had, what else did we have? We had a couple of Greys that came in and taught me about navigation.
Mhm.
And there were a lot of worker Draco.
Mhm.
And they're about the same size as the Mars Raptors.
Okay.
But I don't remember what they taught. I remember seeing them. The psi abilities were usually taught by Greys
Mhm.
because they could show us without killing us. The Draco tended to over-energize it. And even though we're modified to live around Draco, when they were trying to do the psionic abilities, they could overdo it real easily. But they did teach us that when you step into someone's mind, you're polite, you don't stomp. I've had humans on Earth think they were reading me, and it just felt like somebody stomping through my head with army boots. They taught us not to do that.
The Greys,
They would not.
the Greys did, yeah?
No, the Draco.
Oh, the Draco, okay.
Yeah, because you had to talk to them in their heads.
Right. Wow.
They would talk to us with their mouths when they had to, but during the psionics testing, you had to be telepathic. You had to talk to them full intimacy telepathy,
Mhm.
where nothing is being held back, everything is there. But when you talk to the Greys, you had to have a barrier because they didn't want you knowing everything in their head.
Sure.
So you had to learn both methods. You had to learn both methods and who they were appropriate with.
Interesting.
So that was also later on. So yeah, the first few years we learned the Liebel-Lungen-Leads.
The what?
I was the Liebel-Lungen-Lied.
Uh-huh.
It's the epic poems about the Nibelung kings
Mm-hmm.
of Austria. I think it was Austria.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, Siegfried and Brunhilde. So, and they made it very epic that these were wonderful, heroic people, and that you should want to be like them. And so when I read them in English translation, I'm going, this is so dumb. And then I studied history and found out that the real Siegfried and Brunhilde lived 600 years earlier.
Uh-huh.
And they were Merovingians. Well, Siegfried was Merovingian and Brunhilde was an Ostrogoth.
What did they teach you about World War II?
They taught that World War I was about unifying all of the German-speaking countries into one country,
Mm-hmm.
so that they would stop being abused by Southern Europe.
Mm-hmm.
That they had learned the lesson under Bismarck that as long as they were fractured into tribes, that they would never be respected.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what World War I was about from their point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And that they had been punished at the end of that war to the point of it being a genocide, because their government was taken away. It was replaced by a liberal democracy that had no respect for the people. And that at the same time, the bankers had been printing money to make whatever money people had useless.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of people that were on pensions of the equivalent of $500-600 a month. And that was all the money they got. And all of a sudden, their money wasn't even worth the paper it was printed on.
Mm-hmm.
And those people couldn't buy coal to heat their homes. They couldn't buy coal to cook their food. They couldn't buy food. They lost their homes. They were out on the streets in winter. And winter in Germany, we're talking deep snow.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people died. The Germans in space considered this a genocide that they were victimized by. And they saw the aristocracy backed Hitler to put an end to this.
Mm-hmm.
They saw it as their ancestral tribal leaders
Mm-hmm.
had taken matters in hand to save the people. And they saw the genocide of the German Jews as taking the outsiders responsible for their genocide, and they made a big deal about that they had tried to send them to other countries,
Mm-hmm.
and that no one would take them.
Okay, so that was what they said there on Mars, right?
That was what they said on Mars.
Okay.
That no one would take them because they were universally hated.
Uh-huh.
That was what they said on Mars. Now, I'm a quarter Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
They never hassled me once about being Jewish.
Okay.
They never hassled me about my Jewish grandmother, not once. And because of how the law of Moses is set up, my mother's mother was Jewish. That makes me Jewish. They never hassled me about that, ever. They hassled me about the Draco DNA that the CIA had shot me up with. They called me a miscavert because of the Draco DNA.
Okay.
For audiences.
But why the concentration camps? Why kill the Jews off, and not just the Jews, and the Gypsies and the Slavic people? Did they talk about this?
It was anyone that they saw as an outsider that was taking jobs away from their people. We see the same thing in the United States today. I mean, come on. Isn't that what Trump's saying about the Mexicans?
Mm-hmm.
That nobody else wants them, that they're taking our jobs, that they're raping our women, that they're killing our old people.
Okay.
As far as I know, he hasn't killed anyone yet, but we have prison camps all over our southern border that are tremendously overcrowded, and he's taking credit for those, although, to be honest, they started under President Bush and were continued and expanded under Obama, and Trump's just expanding them more. So it's been this entire century that the American presidents have been blaming the Mexicans for the economic problems.
I see.
So how long is it going to be before the next president starts killing them?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our press has already made a big deal about children dying in these camps.
Yeah.
So, and half the population is angry about it, but the other half thinks it's fine. So,
okay. So that was their view of history then. And what was their vision forward? I mean, what was all of this about? Did they want to constantly expand? Did they want to settle on Mars? What was the overall mission that they taught you?
they taught us that Earth was gone,
Mm-hmm.
that they were what was left of the human race, and that it was our duty to make sure humanity survived.
Mm-hmm.
And they had gone back in time and rescued people who would have otherwise died from the plague. They went back in their own history and took these people out because they had the technology to bring them back from the dead and heal them from whatever was wrong. So they went back as far as 400 years. And so we're talking about millions of German-speaking people that they pulled out of history and settled into colonies. And they knew that they did not have enough genetic diversity to maintain all these colonies. They were hoping that the Americans that were serving in their space programs would want to live in these colonies. And when the CIA shot them up with Draco, that ruined that because they wanted humans.
I see.
They did not want hybrids.
All right, that's the end of that video. You can search her name in the search bar if you would like to see more. Y'all have a beautiful day. I may come back and speak on these things. Have a great life.